Unfortunately, my adventures have unearthed another story that led me directly towards the Daily Mail, but I will spare you the actual act of opening the website and then ranting about how unbelievably stupid the website is for a long time. But the Daily Mail did reveal why Lucas Paqueta is facing 2 more FA charges, or at least they tweeted that out, and then all of the Twitter accounts that tweet 400 times a day and all recycle the exact same tweets decided to pick that up and to put the Daily Mail as a source, because all of those Twitter accounts used to get clowned on for not attaching sources, but those accounts are what those accounts are. So we managed to find another article that is going to help color in the story of what's going on with Lucas Paqueta. And I hope that you appreciate the fact that I managed to not get sidetracked on any of the normal tangents that I would have normally got sidetracked there. I got this in under a minute, and we are already talking about the guy that we're supposed to be talking about here. Because Lucas Paqueta, you might remember, was charged, or at least was placed under investigation by the English FA, the Football Association, for basically collaborating with bettors. Now, I made a Zealandism way back when that happened. It feels like it was years ago. It was a couple months ago. And the plays are incredibly obvious, right? Innocent until proven guilty applies to criminal law, but we're talking about Football Association law here. And so this is, did you think he did it sort of territory? And Lucas Paqueta, certainly when you look at the plays in which a lot of people in Brazil put down bets on him picking up yellow cards, some of those yellow cards look unbelievably intentional, right? Sort of the sort of brain dead tackle that you would sub a player out for on Football Manager because you get so frustrated at him. That's the sort of thing Lucas Paqueta was doing on a fairly regular basis. And the first thing that jumps out to me here in this Flash Score article is that apparently 60 people were in on this, betting on the Brazilian midfielder receiving yellow cards. Now, none of the bets were actually that big. That was something we talked about at the time. It was a bunch of people placing a bunch of smaller bets, maybe up to 550 euros, on Paqueta getting a yellow card. But clearly, based off of the way the investigation was reported initially, there is a preponderance of evidence that Lucas Paqueta is going to have a very difficult time dealing with. And a pretty surefire way to figure out if somebody's guilty or not is if they start destroying evidence. And that is why Lucas Paqueta is back on the docket, because my boy, not exactly a mastermind criminal here, has allegedly started to destroy evidence and has managed to pick up more charges from the English Football Association, which apparently, according to multiple reports, risks the potential of a perpetual lifetime ban from the sport. That's how bad all of this is looking on Paqueta. And it's kind of surreal, because I feel like after this came out, everybody kind of forgot about it. Paqueta is still playing. And based off of the way that the entirety of this proceeding is set up, there's going to be like a hearing in March, and the decision won't come until later in 2025. Paqueta is going to be able to play the rest of the season as a normal professional footballer. And I suppose when you actually try to think about how this situation works, there's really no other better way to do it, right? That's just the only possible way they could line up and do it. I mean, the moment somebody's charged, you make them sit out for a year and a half? That doesn't make a lot of sense. Even though it certainly looks like this dude's guilty as hell, you kind of have to let him play until you can make that final decision in whatever court system the FA is inventing to try and judge all of this. But what actually happened with Paqueta's stuff? So basically, as part of the initial investigation, right, he was asked to hand over his phone. Okay, so he hands over his phone to the authorities. They go through, they're scanning for calls, they're scanning for messages or whatever. They give it back to him. They tell him to hang on to it just in case they might need it again, but they didn't want to hold his phone hostage forever. At which point they do come back to Paqueta again, and they're like, hey, we need to take a look at your phone one more time. There's some new stuff that's come to light or whatever that we would want to cross-check. At which point, Lucas Paqueta he throws his hands up and goes, don't have it. Phone's gone. I think the dog ate the homework on this one. This man launched his phone to the bottom of the ocean. You're never going to see this phone again. And this is incredibly guilty behavior, obviously. The only extenuating circumstance is if for some reason they came back to try and get his phone again, but they didn't tell him to hang on to it. and he just kind of decided to get a new one, in which case Lucas Paquetá, considering all of the other charges that are already kind of levied against him for all these various yellow cards that he allegedly rigged, he might just be the unluckiest person on the face of the earth. But given everything else that's swirling around this, it certainly feels like he's very intentionally blown his phone into 1,000 pieces so that the investigators could not get their hands on it again, and that caused the investigators to levy 2 other charges against the Brazilian player. The official charges, according to The Sun, are 2 aggravated breaches for non-cooperation. And if you know anything about charges, there are breaches for non-cooperation, and then there's aggravated, right? This is like incredibly intentional. We're adding an extra adjective in there. Aggravated breaches of non-cooperation, which is what, went ahead and stacked on the whole maybe I'm going to be banned for life thing. They also charged him with 2 breaches of FA Rule F3, which relate to his mobile phone. Who the hell knows what that is? I have no idea. And it's important to mention that Paquetá strongly denies any wrongdoing. Obviously, if he didn't, then this proceeding would have been done a long time ago, even though his phone disappeared like a magician's prop. But what to actually make of this entire situation? The FA is right to be going for a lifetime ban here. I am a massive proponent of putting huge bans in place. I'm surprised Ivan Toney was let off on such a short charge to begin with, but you have to make an example out of these types of people. Lucas Paquetá, I don't necessarily think he's an awful guy. He clearly got mixed up with some people that convinced him it was a good idea to rig matches in terms of at least getting a yellow card, which in my opinion, you're letting betting odds and people betting on the game affect your decision-making on the field, which is rigging the match, right? He decided it was a good idea to participate in that sort of stuff. He decided, allegedly, if the accusations are true, to do that repeatedly, and then he tried to help cover it up once he was caught instead of owning up to it immediately, which means this is somebody that is very likely to reoffend because they clearly don't immediately have some sort of moral epiphany or professional epiphany that it's a terrible idea to try and resist against this sort of stuff. If it is true. I think a lifetime ban makes complete sense because there is a lot of sports betting going around. I am on the record talking about how I believe that's probably not the best thing. People can do whatever the hell they want with their money. Obviously, sports gambling and sports betting is an addiction that a lot of people struggle with. A lot of money gets lost by people that can't afford to lose that money when it goes into sports betting. But the more this sports betting, because footballers are people too, the more this sports betting proliferates, the more access the players are going to have to it as well. So we're going to end up with more and more situations like this, more and more players, whether it be Ivan Toney or, everybody's favorite Italian on Newcastle or Lucas Paquetá, that end up in betting scandals, whether it's themselves or other people betting on them and what they are going to be doing on the field, because people just get addicted to betting and they, whether it's a hobby or an actual addiction, they find that it's something fun to do. And since it is so common and since it is everywhere, it needs to be made so unbelievably abundantly clear that you cannot do this. Okay, it needs to be made so unbelievably clear that you can't do this, right? Because I would even draw a difference between Paul Pogba, who we're talking about in the other Zealandism today, and Lucas Paquetá. Because what Paul Pogba is trying to do is he is trying to augment his own performance. Right. And again, in the Paul Pogba video, I talk about how there is a difference between somebody like Lance Armstrong that's manipulating everything for a decade and blood doping to Paul Pogba, who is taking a supplement that he did or didn't know might contain a banned substance to help him heal up from an injury. Right. There is a significant difference between those two things. Life is full of shades of gray, and that's why there's 50 shades of them and a bunch of erotic fan fiction about it. But refocusing on the actual betting problem for a second, this is blatantly trying to affect the outcome of a match in a way that is actually detrimental to your team and in a way that would allow fans to question the true intent of players and officials and coaches and linesmen, who I guess fit in the officials category, and freaking ball boys, right? Anybody that could potentially have a say in anything that could be wagered on. All of a sudden, all of that can be called into question if you are not punishing people like this hard enough. And considering there are only going to be more problems like this in the future, you need to try and deter those problems as much as possible. A lifetime ban, if all of this stuff is true, it makes sense to me. it's fair, right? Because you got to meet this problem head on, or it will literally swamp the entire sport and become a much bigger controversy than it is right now, with just a few players around the edges getting suplexed by this. Right, but Paquetá, according to these latest charges, is involved in a cover-up, which is definitionally the opposite of admitting wrongdoing and submitting yourself to either gambling counseling or just saying, hey, I fucked up and I'm not going to do it again and I'll take the punishment you got. And so you just have to make an example. You just have to make an example. It just makes sense, but it is wild he's going to be able to play out this season. It's like a retirement season when you're not retiring. It kind of feels like. We'll see what comes out of the hearing in March.